Do you remember civics class? I do, barely. I remember something about three branches of government, a test I probably crammed for the night before, and if you grew up in an American classroom, a cartoon bill sitting on the steps of Capitol Hill.
I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
That little guy tried his best, and honestly, he might have done more for civic education than an entire semester of class, which is funny, but also kind of a problem. Because here's the thing, most of us didn't leave school knowing how democracy actually feels. We knew the mechanics, sort of, but we didn't know what it feels like to hold power and be afraid to use it. We didn't know what it feels like when the system works against you and you have to decide whether to fight it, inside it, or outside of it. But some of us learned that somewhere else entirely. Okay, before we get any further, I'm Bryson. I'm an interdisciplinary studies student, and this is my capstone project. What sounds very academic, but stick with me, because what we're actually doing here is playing video games and asking uncomfortable questions about power. As you can see, this is being recorded in a virtual world called VR chat, partly because it fits the subject matter of this whole series better than my living room with a clumsy orange cat ever could, and partly because a well-designed virtual environment like this is a more professional production space for a project about interactive worlds than anything I could set up at home. It felt right. Over the next several episodes, we're going to sit down with 4 games: Tropico, Suzerain, Just Cause 3, and Lawgivers II, and use them as lenses for understanding how democratic systems work, how they fail, and what it actually looks like to resist when they do. But before we get there, I want to lay down some groundwork because there's a real problem this series is going to try to solve, and it's worth naming directly. The way most people understand democracy, institutions, legitimacy, why any of it matters, isn't coming from a classroom anymore. It's coming from media, from entertainment, from stories we choose to consume. Think Star Wars, Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, Star Trek, and so much more. And yet somehow almost nobody is studying what that actually produces. Researchers have looked at other games, specifically designed to teach civics, but nobody's seriously asking what players are quietly absorbing from games that were never designed to teach anything at all. And there's even a study that backs this kind of idea up, where it found that even games with no political content whatsoever, we're talking Call of Duty, Counter-Strike, Fortnite, showed measurable growth in civic understanding just from the teamwork involved. Just coordinating with strangers toward a shared goal is enough to move the needle. Other research confirms this, that civic outcomes in digital environments aren't just about what content is present. They depend on context, interaction, the decisions players are asked to make by the developers, which means the design of the experience matters just as much as the subject matter itself. So here's the specific problem this series is trying to solve. If you're a game developer, a writer, a world builder, you're already teaching people things about power, whether you mean to or not. The question is whether you understand what you're teaching and whether you can do it more intentionally. If you're a player, this might reframe some games you've already played in some ways you didn't expect. And to be honest, the civic knowledge gap isn't going to be fixed by better textbooks or a more charismatic version of that little bill on the Capitol steps. It's going to be filled partially by the entertainment we're already consuming. This series is about understanding how exactly that works. To understand what these games are actually modeling, we need a quick foundation. And I mean quick, this isn't a lecture. At the broadest level, political scientists have historically organized governance into 3 categories. Ignore the none. We're not going to talk about that because that's not governance. First, democracy in its classical sense, aka the rule of all, But we're going to talk specifically liberal representative democracy is ruled by the people, exercised through elected representatives, and protected by rights and institutions. And I want to be upfront about something. I think this is the best one we've got, not because it's perfect, it isn't, but because of one specific feature. It gives people who are unhappy with their leadership little sad face, a way to remove them, remove the people in charge. It sounds simple, but it's not. Almost every other system in history has required violence, or at least the minimum, the credible threat of it, to change who holds power. Democracy at its best lets you just vote. So that gets a little check mark for me. Now, oligarchy. Rule by the few. Usually a small group, usually defined by wealth, military power, or inherited status. A council of elites, a ruling class, a junta, military leadership, aka. And then autocracy. Rule of one, monarchies and dictatorships. It concentrates power in a single individual, a monarch, a dictator, a president who has quietly made elections irrelevant. This always requires violence to enact any sort of change. Now, each of these are not perfect. Each has their own benefits, but they also have what's called an evil twin. I'm going to call an evil twin. A version of itself that starts with a reasonable idea and ends somewhere dark. Democracy's evil twin is mob rule, the tyranny of the majority where rights dissolve because enough people voted for it. Oligarchy's evil twin is kleptocracy, rule by the few, for the few, at the expense of everyone else. The whole goal of that government is to extract resources, extract energy, extract everything just to benefit the few. And autocracy's evil twin is totalitarianism, where the state doesn't just govern your behavior, it tries to govern your mind. Now, these aren't abstract categories. They are actual terrain that these games that we're going to talk about in these series are navigating. And once you can see them, you'll start seeing them everywhere. So here's what we're working with. Tropico 6 drops you into the role of El Presidente, the eternal leader of a small island nation. You manage factions, run elections you may or may not steal, build propaganda infrastructure, and keep your people just satisfied enough not to revolt. It's a comedy. It's also a surprisingly accurate model of soft authoritarianism and the micromechanics of how leaders hold on to power without ever fully resorting to force. Suzerain is quieter and heavier. Your President Anton Reign of the fictional post-authoritarian republic, walking into office after decades of dictatorship. Every conversation is a decision. Every alliance costs something. It's the best simulation I've come across of what it actually feels like to try to rebuild democratic institutions when the people around you aren't sure they want them rebuilt. And then we got Just Cause 3. It's the explosive one. Rico Rodriguez returns to his occupied home island to take down a military dictator. It raises questions the other games don't touch. What are the moral limits of insurgency? What does liberation actually cost? When does the violence of resistance start to look like the violence it set out to fight? And Lawgivers II is the institutional one. You write bills, you build coalitions, you watch good policy die in committee, and bad policy pass because someone made a deal. It's the least glamorous of the four, but it's probably the most honest. None of these games were designed as civic education. They were designed to be fun, and that's exactly the point. Here's what I believe, and what this series is going to try to demonstrate. Entertainment games built around political worlds and governance systems are already functioning as informal civic learning environments. Players are absorbing real frameworks for understanding power, legitimacy, and resistance, not because the developers sat down and said, let's teach democracy, but because good world building and good systems design produces meaning, whether you intend them not to or not. The design patterns that make these lessons land: faction systems, propaganda mechanics, legitimacy scores, moral trade-offs, the slow erosion of institutional trust. Those patterns are transferable to new games, to new worlds, the kinds of projects that many of you watching this are probably already playing or building. That's the argument. We're going to spend the next several episodes proving it. The little bill on capital steps did his job. He made the process legible. But legibility isn't the same thing as understanding, and understanding isn't the same thing as caring. Games at their best make you care. They put you in the seat of power, or they put you under it. And they make the consequences feel real. That's not a small thing. All right, next episode, we're going to see Tropico, the island nation of El Presidente.